Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 198 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we're sitting here waiting while the Ents slowly, casually make their way to Isengard.
Well, those guys are pretty much known for taking their time, but I don't know, Alan. I think they're feeling motivated right now. I suspect the Ents will get to Isengard before we know it.
Well, certainly before Saruman knows it.
Certainly. But I'm sure we still have a little bit of time while they sort out their differences with the White Wizard.
Have a little chat.
Yeah, a little chat. Little friendly chat. Little coming to terms. But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean.
And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are working our way through J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium, a few pages at a time.
Usually. But a few times a season, we take a break from the books to interview a special guest, and that's what we're doing here today. Now, before we introduce that special guest, I wanted to take a few minutes to mention a PPP milestone because today, it's the 5th anniversary of the release of our very first episode.
Wow, man, 5 years already. I can't believe.
I can't believe that.
It's astounding, really.
Really
I know
is.
People have heard us say this many times before, but
because it's true.
Because it's true. When we first started this thing back in 2016, with that first episode on fairy stories and the biography and stuff, I never imagined in my wildest dreams that we'd still be doing this 5 years later. And well into Lord of the Rings, but still with a long, long way still to go before we're done.
Long way. At least 8 years or so, I think. But
yeah, I think so.
I also didn't think that we'd ever have the chance to interview so many big names in the Tolkien community, including today's guest.
Seriously. Yeah, it's been a pretty amazing ride. And I do want to take a moment on this anniversary to thank everybody out there who's listening. Folks, honestly, as much as Alan and I like each other, and we do like each other, we genuinely, like each other and like hanging out together. But still, I don't know that we would have kept this thing going this long without, because it's a fair bit of work.
We might have done an episode a month.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we would have done quite this much for quite this long without the support and the encouragement and the engagement we've gotten from everybody out there. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to those of you who have written to us with questions, shared us on social media, posted reviews on Apple Podcasts, or supported us on Patreon,
or voted for us in the Tolkien Society Awards last year for Best Online Content, which is still pretty amazing.
Yeah, thank you all so very much. And one of the things we're going to be doing to celebrate is upgrading our audio processing. Believe it or not, starting today, all our episodes are going to be released in stereo. So thanks to our producer, Jordan, for continually helping us step up our quality.
And that's awesome news. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear us in stereo.
Yeah, you and I are still in mono, but maybe he'll do a little panning effect. I don't know. It'll make a big difference with the music, though. So the intro and outro will sound great. But
cool. Great.
Yeah. So for now, why don't we go ahead and introduce our special guest who has been, frankly, waiting patiently far too long. Folks, today we are very excited to be welcoming Ted Nasmith back to the podcast. Ted's one of the most well-known names in Tolkien and in fantasy illustration. His illustrations have appeared in the official Tolkien calendar as early as 1987 and many times since, including this year's calendar. In fact, as we're recording this in January of 2021, I'm looking at one of his works right now.
I'm looking at the same one. It's the lovely Taniquetil.
Or as I call it, Oyolose.
Right.
For obvious reasons.
Because it's just too hard to pronounce. But folks, Ted's art has also graced the covers and the pages of lots of editions of Tolkien's works. He's possibly best known for the 1998 and 2004 illustrated editions of the Silmarillion, which he says on his website are among his proudest achievements, and I can see why.
Yeah.
More recently, though, his illustrations have appeared in the new 40th anniversary edition of Unfinished Tales that came out in late 2020, and we'll be asking him about soon.
What a gorgeous edition that is, too.
Oh, it truly is.
Now, we first met Ted back at Tolkien 2019 in Birmingham. We had a chance to interview him briefly in the lobby of the hotel, which you can hear, kind of, in episode 136. Now, we had a great conversation with him then, both on mic and off, but we have been wanting to get him back on for a proper full-length interview ever since.
Indeed, we have, and today is the day. So now, Ted Nasmith, let me welcome you back to the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here. Thanks for such an amazing introduction as well.
It's been our pleasure. Thanks for waiting.
It's wonderful to have you. Yeah.
It really is. It has been a year and a half since we talked to you back at Tolkien 2019. And, well, let's be honest, 2020 was an interesting year, to say the least, for all of us. So how have you been doing? How have you been hanging in there?
I've been doing fine, actually. Oddly enough, despite that, yes, the year has been unprecedented and scary, and it goes on, and we're not quite sure how long it's going to be for all of the things that are going on here and what it's going to take, etc. But it turned out to be a very good year for me as far as the rest of 2019 and on through 2020. Quite productive, some unbelievable commissions I've had, and I did, of course, most of the work for Unfinished Tales during last winter into the spring, so that was part of, carried me along, and I had more time on my own, I guess. I moved house, and so that's one of the factors. I've just got a lovely, cozy studio apartment here, and I'm just finding that I'm kind of in a place where I want to kind of go back and review some of the things I've done in the past that I never quite completed, say, or wanted to just get better organized. Several decades of art and sketches and other things like that I brought with me. So it's partly, just taking stock and looking at things, getting more organized, and going back to projects that I've never seemed to have time for in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. That's good to hear. I mean, it's, going through something like we've all been going through, it does kind of force you sometimes to take a step back and just kind of look around and think through, what's really important and what can I do at this time. And I'm glad to hear you've been able to use it productively. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. And watching my share of Netflix too.
Well, I'm sure we all
Thank
are.
goodness for Netflix.
Oh, yes. Thank goodness for the internet.
If this thing had not happened in the age of streaming television, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah, I'm thinking, imagine this happening when we were in junior high, Sean. And, there's like 3 channels to watch on your television set.
I know. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. There have been a few bright spots for us as well. And I have to tell you, one of my bright spots was that new edition of Unfinished Tales, which is now on my bookshelf. Mm-hmm. I want to hear a little bit more about that. Well, not only the book, right? But there's also the new calendar for 2021 that goes with it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that got off the ground? How does a project like that start? Does HarperCollins just give you a call and say, hey, Ted, here's what we're doing this year? How does that work?
Yeah, it's not too far off. There actually is quite a story here. If we go back to 2005, just after this new Silmarillion came out with my artwork, it was discussed that, Unfinished Tales, it may be time to do an illustrated edition, and they were looking at me doing that for them. And I drew up a whole series of thumbnails at the time. I submitted a whole plan for the whole thing, and it was very seriously considered, but Christopher Tolkien has the final word on something like that, and he ultimately decided against the idea, and as far as I understand, it is that the History of Middle-earth books were coming out, one by one, these lovely, detailed, annotated discussions of all of the writings from A to Z, and I think because when Unfinished Tales came out, there wasn't any real certainty that a book or a series like the History of Middle-earth would come out, and that Christopher Tolkien would be able to accomplish something like that. So I think he was feeling that Unfinished Tales was kind of an orphan, kind of a premature edition of, what it said, unfinished works and so on. Right. However, it turned out to be such a big seller at the same time. It's too bad that he couldn't sort of see beyond his own vision of the idea or his own participation in it. Anyway, the story was it was shelved, and that was that. I went on to paint The Blue Wizards Journeying East a few years later, sometime or other between then and now, and that was one of the pieces that was intended for the book, and I went ahead and just kind of did it for myself at that time,
Yeah.
But what kicked things off this time was that I did hear from, let me see now, I was in touch with Chris Smith at HarperCollins, my editor, and this is back in the spring of 2019, and it was nothing related to Unfinished Tales. I was just saying that, you see that Amazon is doing this big new production on, they're calling The Lord of the Rings, and it's supposedly going to be set in the Second Age, and I was thinking, Unfinished Tales, it's kind of a good time for that book to be featured. What are the possibility of, reconsidering an illustrated edition? I seem to remember that was more or less the conversation that I brought it up as a result of, thinking, they might be good timing for that sort of thing. And that was when Chris told me, well, in fact, we are thinking about that very thing. We're considering doing an illustrated edition, and it's coming up to its 40th anniversary. So you will be hearing from us about that. Why don't you resend us that scheme that you had from back in 2005? Yeah. And so I thought, well, okay, let's get that up and running. He said, we don't know if we're going to do a multiple artist or single artist edition. We're just still tossing around ideas on that right now. Mm-hmm. But I got it together, and I added some new sketches and things. It took a little longer to produce that for him, and then sent it off in a PowerPoint sort of format.
Sure.
So nice looking and everything, and I said, this is going to be really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And I didn't hear anything else. I went to Birmingham. I was talking to Alan Lee at the time, and he hinted that something might be coming up. He said, I think you and I may be working together on something soon. So that was a nice little hint, which I didn't pursue. I just figured, I'll find out soon enough. And by, I guess it would have been September, Chris had gotten back to me and said, okay, we're definitely going forward with this now. We're going to do you and Alan and John Howe all together on the same edition. And we've never done anything like this before, so bear with us. And he sent me kind of a spreadsheet with first and second choices for titles of subjects, and then suggesting which of the three of us might take those on as a provisional kind of like, well, here's a scheme. Let's see what you guys think, and if there's any changes or concerns, then we'll work it out.
Right.
And I did express my preference for a couple of them, including that Gondolin scene. He beheld the vision of Gondolin amid the snow.
Yeah.
Because I had felt very strongly that I'd rediscovered that scene in this winter sort of suggestion there.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do it again for that reason. We all got more or less the scenes that we pretty much wanted or would have liked to have.
Oh, that's good.
None of us were really given sort of a second choices, thankfully. I don't know. I didn't have, you asked about possibly communication between the three of us, but there was none of that. I never talked to John or Alan during the production process itself, but afterwards we compared notes a little bit here and there. It was just kind of in the fall of 2019 working out who would do what, and then by, I guess, early January, we had the final kind of roster of who was getting what illustration, and we could start to work on those by that point.
Wow.
And we knew we had till, I think, about end of April, I believe it was, for the final artwork. And then COVID hit.
Yeah,
and then the people that do the scans for me here in Toronto there, they were sort of in lockdown, so I wasn't sure if they were open or what was going on, and I started to realize, like, oh my gosh, who's going to photograph these paintings?
Right.
My new landlord happens to be a photographer, so I thought, well, maybe he could handle this. All it is just shooting still art. How hard can that be?
It's tricky as a photographer, I'll tell you. It's exceedingly hard.
I hope he's not listening right now, because he really messed up pretty bad, because he's using an Apple and I'm on a PC, and for some reason the colors were just not matching up properly.
And that's exactly the reason why doing it is so difficult, because the color space that you're working with, that your camera's working with, it is a real challenge. I had somebody ask me that, and I said, no, that's beyond my capabilities. I'm not going to be able to do that for you.
Wow.
It's hard.
So anyway, we're up to nearly the end of April, and I've got scans from this fellow, and I'm like, this is not going to work. And I will regret it for the rest of my life if I send this stuff in. So I checked with Colorgenics, this other place, and they said, oh, yeah, I'm way too passive sometimes. I just phoned them. I said, guys, are you in business? What's happening there? Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Okay. I've got something really important. I got to bring 5 paintings down to you, and I need them right away.
Right now, yesterday.
So,
can you scan them and send them back in time while we're at it? Yeah.
Yeah, and no problem. And I got them down to do that. And one of the reasons I got my neighbor, my landlord, was that I thought he was going to charge me less money for it.
Oh, no.
Turned out I was paying him more than I was going to pay those guys, because I hadn't really kind of thought through exactly how they price them, which is by area, not so much like per job.
Well, yeah, a specialty shop can, they have it where they can price it by volume, and, I'm sure it's
right.
Easier
Yeah, that
them.
makes sense.
It all worked out in the end. I got my scans in and under the wire. It was definitely the Johnny come lately, like everyone else had it all done.
Of course,
I think John Howe did his in like 1 month or something. I'm not sure.
Of course,
the guy is amazing.
He's just
overachievers.
Just shrugs it. Nah, no big deal.
I can do that.
And I'm thinking, John, you're getting into one of the official Tolkien books. This is this is pretty cool, eh?
That's true.
You want to put your best foot forward here,
Yeah.
It's true because he's got his Oscar, he's got all these things, but he had never actually had his illustrations.
Right. That's true. Yeah, he hadn't been in one of
I think about all the Alan Lee illustrated editions. I think about all the Ted Nasmith illustrated editions, but you're right.
Yeah. And it's funny, Alan, while he was doing his presentation at Birmingham, mentioned that he would really like to get back to doing more folklore, art for English folklore.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so he's had enough of Tolkien for the time being, and I will never have enough of Tolkien. But
we hear you.
We're happy to hear that.
But it's nice that he's had such a great gig, and his work is outstanding. There's no question.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, really, just between the three of you, I felt like each of you managed to get just the perfect scenes for each of your styles. And that was one thing I was really just interested in. You kind of touched on it, just sort of, it's amazing that
they
you
all
each
fell into
managed
place.
to get, you each sort of managed to get your first choices, which is why that worked out so well. So it's, a stroke of good fortune. I think
there was a little bit of envy there. John Howe had some wonderful coastal scenes, and kind of a bit bummed out that I got the Aldarian arriving back from his first voyage. But I definitely wanted an Aldarian as well. I love that story so much.
It is such an amazing story. I'm really looking forward to when we get to Unfinished Tales for that exact reason.
I can't wait to do it someday. Yeah.
To give that the full Prancing Pony podcast treatment, that's going to be like half the season, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think so. It's such a wonderful bit of human drama, just this.
It is. It's such a different scale than so much of his work in other areas. Yeah.
And sad, it's just this marriage falling apart, and
it really is.
And it's just so human.
Very, very different sort of narrative for Tolkien, and yet it has all that background, and it takes place in the midst of the legendarium like that. Right. Extraordinary, and it's too bad that one we didn't have the full manuscript of it.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I know. It would have been.
And at the same time, it's sort of the best picture we get of Numenor, really, in detail.
Yes, exactly. So that's the other thing, is that it's the only fully fleshed out sort of narrative that approaches that we have of Numenor. And the sort of synoptic Silmarillion account in the Calabath.
Yeah, right. That's true. Well, before we continue with Ted, this seems like a good time to go ahead and take a quick break, just to remind you to visit our website, theprancingponypodcast.com.
Yeah, all the good stuff is there. Show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and also our online storefront where you can get PPP shirts, mugs, stickers, and more.
And one of the best resources we have is our library page. It's been fully revamped, too. So after all, we love the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, and we want to make sure you can get your hands on any of the books we mention here.
And there are a lot of them, aren't there?
Yes, there are. Over 5 years, we've mentioned a lot of books on the show.
Truth is, we talk about a lot of Tolkien-related stuff on the podcast, including our favorite works of art. But at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. And that's why we have the library page, with links to every book we've mentioned on the show, including the 40th anniversary edition of Unfinished Tales we just talked about. So go get yourself a copy of that if you don't have it already.
Oh, definitely. Now, folks, of course, we do make a few pennies from the purchases you make from those links. So thank you for your support. Well, now we'll get back to Ted. Last time you talked to us, you told us about how your sister introduced you to The Lord of the Rings and how you really quickly started doing illustrations on your own. You mentioned that there weren't many artists giving Tolkien that epic artistic treatment at the time, and you recognized you could bring something new to the field. What was that special something you felt was missing back then? We'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, well, I'm trying to think, kind of what the timeline might have been, but let's say within a few weeks or months of discovering the Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring, my sister there, I guess I started realizing that this is a book that really deserves to be illustrated, and I certainly wanted to start doing pictures for it, just quite spontaneously. And at that time I was in high school. I was an art student in a commercial art program, and my main kind of passion at that point was automotive illustrations, car stuff, advertising, and this was 180 degrees, swing around to a wholly different content, landscapes and mythology and history, etc. So that whole nostalgic thing with The Lord of the Rings grabbed me so much. Now, I guess, the fact that here were these books, which this was the Valentine edition with Barbara Remington's wonderful pink flamingos and all of that, the emus or whatever they were on the cover. And there wasn't a lot of artwork. There was I guess we had a book of essays around Tolkien. It was something that appeared, and I couldn't seem to find my copy. I have it here somewhere. But there were 3 little drawings in that book. One of what was a wizard, looked like Gandalf, a hobbit that could have been Bilbo, and what I took to be Gollum, which in fact is an orc.
Oh, goodness.
And so these 3 little drawings in there, and I thought, I love the style. That's exactly the kind of English storybook sort of look that I love, and I always loved as a kid. And of course, with The Lord of the Rings, I am rediscovering the joy of fairy stories as a child. At a point when your life is kind of upside down because you're a teenager. It's drugs and rock and roll, and it's the '60s. I mean, it's hippie time.
Right.
So I was absolutely delighted with this whole new thing for me with Tolkien.
Right.
I eventually just kind of came to the idea that someone had to do this book justice. Might as well be me, and or at least I will take on the job. I will self-assign, doing pictures for color illustrations for this lovely book. And it's interesting, exciting. Until a real artist comes along. But, not quite. I mean, I had ambitions to be a proper professional illustrator. I was on my way to being that. So it was a question of, on the side, as a hobby, as a kind of a sideline, when I'm at home, I can paint some stuff from Tolkien and kind of pretend that it's being commissioned or that it would eventually be published in the books or something like that. Because why not?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fake it till you make it, huh?
Yeah. It was almost just like, I've got to do this. And, everyone around me is like, this is awesome. You've really got something there, Ted. And,
that's great.
I just kept doing it. My mother was delighted with it. She was reading The Hobbit to her school children. She was a public school teacher. So that was another thing. We all agreed that Tolkien was wonderful. In the family. And of course, my sister had gotten a hold of the book because her high school friends and her boyfriend were completely a bit of a fan group there at the high school at the time. She's my older sister, so she influenced my choices and things. I soon found that I'm drawing Tolkien, and everybody's thinking Lord of the Rings is very cool, so I was definitely a hit with that. So it made me popular too. Really.
So cool. On the whole of it, not a bad thing at all.
So, but I'm doing this, on my own for some years, really, and no idea where it's going to go. Beyond that, I had sent. The calendar started to come out. The illustrated calendars. About 1973, one of Tolkien's own pictures came out from Valentine. Again, so I'm only thinking, North America, publishers in North America. That's where I'm kind of coming from, Canadian or American, when it comes to Tolkien. So I write to Valentine with pictures, photographs of my art, and this is after, of course, I sent a letter to Tolkien himself before he died. So it's all kind of really exciting at that point in time.
Yeah, it would have been.
Wow.
And Valentine just says, we've got, artists or people we're considering for the next number of years, and thanks very much, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And that was that. I came across, around that time, Joan Wyatt's Middle-earth portfolio. This lovely, large illustrated edition of this English woman who's an amateur painter who'd done this whole series of artworks on Lord of the Rings and had it published. And at the very end of that book, there's a blurb for something called the Tolkien Society, which I had not heard of, being that we had no internet, or there was no reason why I would have necessarily come across them for any reason.
Right.
And so I thought, one way of promoting my artwork, but by this time, let's back up a minute. I've been to Scotland in 1976 to join my sister, my wonderful older sister who I admire. And she's now taking architecture at U of T in Toronto, and then decided to take a year in Scotland and Edinburgh. And she suggested that I go there and join her for a holiday in the spring of '76. And I do this. So I'm there for 5 weeks. And part of the reason she's there is that she's met up with someone called James Dunbar Nasmith, who is a senior architect in Edinburgh. And turns out that his spelling of his name, Nasmith, is the same as ours, which is a little bit different than most of the Nasmiths out there, which is Naismith.
Right.
Well, James takes an interest in me as a young illustrator, as an artist, and he gathers some friends of his and one who runs an art gallery, and we have a slideshow where we're showing the slides of what I'd produced by this time for the Tolkien art. And so he drummed up some interest from local people, and he also wrote a letter on my behalf to George Allen and Unwin, the publishers in London, who are the original publishers of Tolkien, of course.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So that got me a letter back saying that, thank you, we're not going to be illustrating The Lord of the Rings anytime soon, but, we appreciate your interest in the books. And I wasn't really asking for that, but it was nice of them to respond at any rate. So now I'm kind of aware of where things are, positioned when it comes to illustrations and publishing and calendars and the books and everything else.
Right.
So I go back, and eventually I do join the Tolkien Society. I start to attend. 1985 was the first time I was over in Oxford with my original art to exhibit, and with some music as well, that I'd started writing music around Tolkien.
Cool.
I figured someone here will have a connection to Tolkien's publishers, and sure enough, that was the case. Someone went to bat for me, showed them some photos, Jane Johnson at that time, and she duly contacted me back in Toronto and said, we really like what we've seen, and one of our representatives is going to be at the World Fantasy Convention in Ottawa in the summer. We can arrange for you to meet with him and show him your originals, which I did.
Wow.
And I also met Martin Springett at that point, and Guy Gavriel Kay. Martin Springett was the cover illustrator for Guy Kay at that time, and I hadn't met either of them, but Martin was playing music that he'd written around The Lord of the Rings, and I was really captivated by his beautiful style, and so I introduced myself, and we've been friends ever since.
Oh, wow, great.
That's great. I also almost got him a gig illustrating Farmer Giles of Ham some years ago, but again, Christopher Tolkien just kind of changed his mind on that one, unfortunately. And yet, Martin ended up becoming very good friends with Pauline Baines.
Oh, okay.
So there's a number of areas of, there's some really interesting connections that have happened over the years. But Guy Kay and I became friends as well. I ended up illustrating one of the omnibus editions of the book, his Fianna tapestries. But anyway, but I did meet with David Fielder from George Allen and Unwin. He liked my artwork. A few months later, they invited me to bring the stuff to England with me because I was coming over for Oxenwood again at that point. And so I was able to leave the artwork to be photographed for the first calendar that they came out in, which was 1987, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So that's how I broke into it. It was like an overnight success that took about 15 years.
Yeah. Man.
What an amazing bunch of connections, though, that got you there. That's an awesome story.
I definitely was sort of destined to do so. And there's another wonderful story connected to that, too. I mean, here I am, dewy-eyed in London, England, on my own, with a wooden case for the original art that a friend had made, being he was handy with carpentry. But this thing was an awfully heavy thing, and it had these little kind of caster wheels on it. And if anyone has ever walked down the streets of London or any other major city, you know that it's like very bumpy, right? So within a block or two where I came from the airport, the thing was just shattered. The wheels were shattered.
Wheels are broken off.
And I finally arrive at a hotel near one of the other train stations I've gone across the city. And anyway, I managed to get to the hotel and settle in and so on like that. And I had this big plan for not only connecting with the Tolkien people, but also going around and looking at museums of artwork that I had come to admire of some of these various
what an opportunity,
wonderful,
right?
yeah, exactly. So, and I left the art case, the famous art case, at George Allen and Unwin's offices, and I'm bright-eyed and just like looking around me at, I walked over from the hotel, and it was just like I'm at Museum Street offices. This is amazing. This is where it's sort of ground central. And I left this thing there, and I went off on my little adventure to museums in places like Liverpool and in the south of England. I was looking for paintings and things by the Victorian masters, Pompier artists, so-called.
Okay.
Frederick Leighton and others. Anyway, I get back, and to my horror, I realized I had not given them the key to the case.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
So I'm thinking the whole thing has been a disaster. I've ruined it. That's so typical of me. Like, and I called them up, and I said, I'm really, really sorry what happened, and I hope I can somehow, save the situation. I said, oh, no worries. All we did was take a screwdriver and undo the whole hasp. Just take the whole hinge off it.
That'll do it.
And I thought,
the thing's coming apart anyway.
Clever British people, and thank God. It's so much for security.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that's great.
It's amazing that I get through the day and all.
Well, circuitous route to success.
Yes,
but we're glad you made it there.
Yes, indeed.
So there we are.
Yeah, well, and I think that's actually a really great segue into the next question I wanted to ask, which is, you mentioned that you had done, prior to starting to illustrate Tolkien, you had done things like automotive art, and I've seen some of that stuff on your website. I'm curious, once you started tackling illustrating Middle-earth, what were some of the artists or what were some of the traditions that inspired you? What traditions out there do you feel have contributed to your own style as an artist? I heard you mention Frederick Leighton just a moment ago, but would love to hear more about that.
You're right. Frederick Leighton came a bit later because he's, of course, a fine art painter, and those artists gave me an idea of how to approach kind of the whole sort of look, the overall finish, that kind of oil paintings, masters, that sort of thing. American painters like Albert Bierstadt and Thomas Cole, Frederick Church have all had a strong influence on me. But early on, it was Maxfield Parrish, one of the more singular romantic painters and illustrators, that grabbed me for Tolkien. I thought, this is the kind of thing that Tolkien would benefit from this sort of look, And you can see that influence in some of my early stuff. Arthur Rackham,
Oh, yeah.
Great English illustrator.
English fantasy illustrator, yeah.
Yeah, the Arthurian.
Wind in the Willows and things like that.
Beautiful stuff. Norman Rockwell, even though his work is, of course, purely Americana, but it's the style, it's the look, it's the kind of the loose kind of painterly way he does things, and I've consulted him on many occasions for expressions of characters and things like that. So, my strength is things, surfaces, shiny stuff. Not so much in terms of figures and costumes. I've had to really work a lot harder to get those things to be reasonably competent, but I will never be as as skilled as some people who really, really have a phenomenal facility for that. But what I do is try to make up for it with the overall finish and look and atmosphere and that sort of thing, of course. And I'm pretty good with the landscaping, of course.
Pretty good. That's
more than pretty good, I'd say, Ted. I'm thinking of some of your works and just these sweeping vistas that you've given us of Middle-earth. Yeah. And, you mentioned like Maxfield Parrish, and I can absolutely see it.
It's that epic style.
Yeah.
So it's that whole vista thing, and then you start to become more familiar and reacquaint myself with landscape art, oil paintings, and these kinds of things that are some of them massively huge canvases when you see them in reality. Not out of the page of a book per se. Anyway, so that was what set me off, and I just thought, well, nobody else is really doing a lot of this kind of thing, and it really deserves to be treated seriously as art, not just even your standard kind of Frank Frazetta sort of illustrator, loosey-goosey kind of pulpy sort of type of artwork. Just wants something more permanent looking, I thought.
Wow.
So I've just continued with that. wasn't sure when it came to The Hobbit whether that's the same style I should be using, but even though I tried kind of doing more Beatrix Potter illustration sort of things, it just was, this isn't me, and it didn't work. Some of that art came out in 1988's calendar, and I've never really liked much of that ever since then. So
fair enough.
I just go with realism anyway when it comes to The Hobbit too.
Yeah.
Well, Ted, you've told us a little bit about the kind of the traditions and the artistic inspirations. What about the process itself? How do you get from an idea to canvas? What sort of materials do you use? Now, don't be afraid of getting technical. Sean and I may not understand. We're not artists, but we do have a lot of them listening, and okay. I know that they would love to hear all the details.
Okay, yeah. I imagine anyone who's working in old media would recognize the things I'm about to tell them, but of course you come up with a concept in your imagination, in your head, which it's fairly easy to scribble down on a piece of paper, and maybe I'll work out 2 or 3 different versions of that initially, but it does start with a thumbnail or thumbnails, and from there it's just a process of refinement to make them larger, more detailed, now you start doing research on background and figures and other details, and I put together pretty carefully done drawing in pencil. And you may or may not have had a chance to do any color sketching or experiments of that sort, but along that trajectory you do get eventually to doing a color sketch, or 2 or 3 maybe in some cases, and just experiment with different treatments of areas if you're not quite sure about the whole thing and you want to try something different, or you're working things out as you're going along. And only once all those things are kind of feel like they're gelling well, do I go to a finished and final full-size illustration, and that will usually be with a large piece of drawing laid over top and then transferred, and then from there just start to paint in.
Wow. In
the painting process itself, I work on an illustration board. The medium I use is gouache, which is water-based body color. It's fairly traditional for illustrators. It's flat, it dries flat so that the camera can illustrate it without any glare, which is a real advantage. Nowadays, what I will do is start with wetting the illustration board, which is pure white, and then start just roughing color in with big brushes, big flat-ended brushes, and may or may not mask off an area that I don't want it to be affected by another color. And, I just work it up so that you'll have kind of a rough version of most of it, or the background areas or something like that. And from there, I start to just refine more and more, but try to keep to the feel of that looser painting if possible. The biggest difficulty for me is knowing when to not keep going. Just leave it alone. It's fine. There was one time when John Howe gave me some good advice. In fact, he said, when I look at your roughs, your color sketches, there's lovely amount of life and movement in those, and sometimes I think you lose that when you go to the finished piece. And that's always sort of stayed with me, and I deliberately loosened my style as a result of that. But overall, I mean, if you keep working on something long enough, it just is going to continue to mature. And I love that, the fact that what I do now, if I do a version of a scene that I've done before, that you're going to see something that's a little bit different. It's me, but it's me plus.
Right.
Yeah, what I've learned from then.
And you've told us before, we talked about this in Birmingham, and I think you mentioned it a few times in your presentation back in Birmingham, about how you always go back to Tolkien's words and really try to stick to what's in the text. And so I think I heard you mention just a moment ago that research is actually part of your artistic process. And I can sort of imagine you looking in the book and thinking, oh, wait, there's supposed to be this right here. Let me get that in there. I imagine it probably does sort of evolve a little bit as you do more of that research, doesn't it?
It does, in fact. And when I was describing how I work, it was more like just how you do a generic illustration. There's always a process of, going back to the original text, and that's a very important part of it. And sometimes I don't always do that properly. I will just go flying off on an idea that looks great as an illustration or a concept. and then realize that it's not really in accord with the book, the particular scene that I'm describing. So I will have to try to reconcile those things. But I'm always keen to come up with as authentic an expression as I can.
Yeah.
But that, to one extent or another, depends on me trusting my own ability to do what I feel is appropriate and not consider that as some kind of betrayal of Tolkien. It's all part of it, really, and there's no way to know where one begins and the other ends anyway. And there are times when I've thought, yeah, I didn't really come very close with that, but other people love the piece. So I can't really sort of be completely objective. I can only just do the best job I can, and that seems to have worked so much that I do trust it.
Yeah.
But let's discuss one particular example when it comes to the research and the evolution of a piece. The most recent piece I've done, and we've just shipped it out as of yesterday to the fellow who commissioned it, and he's in Mountain View, California. So I'm waiting for him to receive it before I post it on Facebook. But it's Glorfindel's Bane, and it's the scene, in Two Oars, in the Tale of Gondolin, that describes the great heroic elf scene of his battle with the Balrog on the mountain pass, as Tuor, Idril, and young Arundel and all the other escapees from the sacking of the city are trying to get across the mountain pass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very dramatic, and I've seen a couple of versions of that, one by John himself that was some years ago now.
I think I've seen that one. I think I know the one you're thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, you sort of see a Balrog, and he's got wings, and he's flying around, and there's Glorfindel.
Right.
And I saw a piece by Justin Gerard of the Glorfindel scene as well, and he did a bang-up job of it, and it's actually not very different from mine in many ways. But he and I were communicating a couple of years ago about Tolkien, about Silmarillion artwork, about Hobbit artwork, and he got my attention because I saw his Battle of Five Armies with Beorn the bear, and I just thought, here's a master illustrator. This guy's amazing. He's really, really good. But he does very kind of caricature-y, sort of Brian Froudy sort of style characters. So it's a bit different. It's a bit more personal to him. But he is an amazing graphic artist for sure. But in any case, getting back to mine, what I realized was Tolkien describes that scene at night. Okay? And I did not want to do a flaming Balrog. This became a question. Why are Balrogs always shown in flames? They aren't necessarily in flame at all points. No. So I thought, so that's something that people will find interesting. Let's depict a Balrog without wings and without being on fire. Because it's definitely not mentioned in any of the even longer accounts that we have. And all the information is shows that's a real sort of discussion point.
Yeah.
And I wanted Glorfindel. Okay, there's a previous version of that scene that I did as a color sketch, and it was around since before I illustrated the Silmarillion from the 90s. And it shows just Glorfindel and the Balrog. The Balrog is flaming. It's a day scene. And I just didn't think about it much, except that was kind of like this image that I had in my mind's eye. And I thought, that's a good one. That'll always make a good painting if I ever get to it. So here we have this commission, this guy wanting this thing. But he doesn't want that particular version of the thing. And I'm realizing that, it's not actually canonical. It's not describing what the book actually tells us, which is that, all of this happens at night. Right. But the problem is, as an illustrator, you're presenting a visual scene. So, night scenes are difficult to do. There is, that much less sort of graphic kind of detail and lighting of things. You have to kind of figure out these kind of off-stage ways of lighting things as theater.
Right.
And I just thought, I'm connecting this to the 2 trips to the Swiss Alps that I've been on with Alex and Ruth, my friends, and they're the ones that I do most of the discussion with on any particular project, and this is one of them. And so I thought, well, how long would it take most people to cross a mountain pass? And Tolkien was doing this very thing when he was there in 1911. Right. So I just think you couldn't get more than halfway up a mountain in an overnight situation with the wounded, and the city, you've escaped a city that's been more ravaged, or, just getting to the mountain foothills themselves would have taken a couple of hours.
Right.
Yep.
So we're just thinking about this in practical terms, like what would really have happened in a situation like that. So I'm thinking it would be dawn by the time they made it to the top of that pass.
Oh, easily.
So we're going to do this scene at dawn, and we're going to have a Balrog that is not flaming, but we're going to make it interesting because he's going to look like he's kind of almost emerging from the rock, a shadowy wall of rock behind him.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Glorfindel is catching the sun, the early rays of the sun coming almost sideways, and he's in glittering golden armor.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
And that was another thing. He had to be bright looking. And so that was that. And now we have snow because we're up in the mountains. So there's all the colors that are involved in snow. And I'm not thinking all this through as I began this piece. I'm just kind of looking, kind of working out and realizing, all these things could have bearing on the finished effect of this thing.
Yeah.
And so across from where we are, we see the column of people coming up from below. Mm-hmm. And there are orcs above them throwing rocks down. And so they're all scattering and trying to find shelter and overhangs and things like this.
Right.
And the closest figures to us are Tuor, Idril, and Arundel, looking over at the scene with Glorfindel, in horror. And the rest of them are kind of like just subordinate as far as mists and the shadows of the morning. And you do get some light catching on that opposite side of the mountain from where we are. So that kind of bookends. And below you can see the city on fire. And beyond that, the snowy mountains and a morning sky. So you've got kind of a conflicted image of battle with a terrible creature, which is set in a kind of fairyland almost in some ways.
Yeah.
But in the mountains, of course, rendered very authentically because now I'm realizing that, mountains are such a wonderful thing to try and render. It's so interesting and so dynamic. And there's a lot of them in Tolkien, thank goodness.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So that one I'm about to debut, and I'm very proud of it because it was an expensive piece to do, and we have a client who's willing to pay that kind of cash for something, and it gives me a chance to really show what I can do as well.
Yeah.
So we really think we've got a fantastic piece there.
Well, I can't wait to see that.
Sounds amazing. I cannot wait to see it.
The same kind of process I could go into for one that I did about this time last year, which was Gandalf and the Witch King confronting at the shattered gate of Minas Tirith. That one as well is now on my website, and again involves a lot of discussion that it just kept improving it the more we kind of confronted what would seem like disadvantages to the expression of this piece. So that was another one I felt like, wow, I really came through on this one. And Jackson didn't do that scene in the film either, which was another reason why it was interesting to take it on. So what's the problem with this thing? Oh, well, Gandalf is kind of static. That's the problem. He's not kind of looking like a warrior when he's standing up to this terrible visage of everything. Everyone cowers before this horrible vision of evil with the Witch King there. So we had to make him look less important than Gandalf, and it's interesting how that came together.
Yeah.
But, use of light as well.
Amazing.
Wow.
Well, it's going to be great to see that, and I'm looking forward to it here in the near future, maybe even by the time this episode is released.
Yeah.
And by the way, the Glorfindel Spain piece will go into this 2022 calendar.
Oh, great.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. It wasn't finished in time for the book, but we can get away with it in the calendar even when we don't have it at nighttime. And by the way, you know how Balrog has this kind of mane, right? And it's not really well defined by Tolkien, but it's kind of there, right? And it bursts into flame and this sort of thing. Well, I thought if it's not in flame, it could look like a stove element, kind of glowing. And that is how I kind of treated it, and it really looks cool.
I bet it does.
And I speaking of influences, I got one idea about this version of the Balrog from, of all things, Death Note, the anime series with the bad guy Roik, and he's got a kind of a spiky mane. So if you look that up, you'll find an interesting kind of take.
That's right. So I've seen bits and pieces of that show. I think my wife was watching it for a little while.
Right. And there's a couple live action movie versions. It turns out too.
We're gonna have to find a link to a picture of that character and share it in our notes for those who don't know it.
Our show notes.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Super cool.
Yeah, so I sort of discovered anime this last year.
Well, you've had time to watch everything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Here in Canada, Netflix has uploaded a whole load of them movies too. We didn't have so much before. So I was like, well, why did I buy that DVD?
Well, you mentioned before and talked a couple of times about how you gravitate towards landscapes. I get that. I dabble in photography. Well, dabble is not really a fair word. Professionally speaking, I've been an architectural photographer for about 15 years, but my hobby is landscape photography. So I get the draw of that epic landscape. I love shooting the American West for that exact reason.
Yes.
Is there a favorite location in Middle-earth, a favorite landscape that you like to paint more than the others, one that you keep coming back to, or at least one that you want to keep coming back to?
I don't consciously think about that particularly, but it seems like lately mountain scenes have continued to arrive in commissions that I had nothing to do with deciding about.
Okay.
And I've done several versions of Rivendell, the most recent being The Fair Valley of Rivendell. It was published in the 2010 calendar. That one, that landscape continues to be of interest. There's all kinds of possibilities for that. So
yeah, that's true. There are.
The Argonath I've painted at least 3 times, maybe 4. If we count a little cartouche I did for a game board, and that one is I may go for again because Ruth and Alex have researched Tolkien's trip to Switzerland.
Yeah,
and they've pretty much reconstructed it, and they published a book available on Amazon. Through Amazon. There's a gorge, the Arlsflucht Gorge. And they're pretty sure that you can discern what look like figures carved into the sides of the cliffs.
Oh, wow.
So
fascinating.
I've never tried doing it in that way where it looks like it's sort of like the 2 figures that were destroyed in Afghanistan by the Taliban.
Right.
But you know what I mean, those colossus there.
Right.
So that, it may have been that was what Tolkien had in mind, rather than sort of freestanding statues, which would have to have been built somehow rather than carved. So those are 2 things like that. Rivendell and the Argonath scenes are definitely bear up repeated. And Minas Tirith seems to have turned up a few times as well now, various reasons. And so that's another one that it's continually interesting to see how what could do with it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Those are all places that I guess, Rivendell, Minas Tirith, you could see approaching those from so many different angles. The Argonath, I guess, probably. Yeah.
Well, there's really
in most cases you're going to
coming down the river.
Right, exactly. But still, they're all such majestic moments from the book.
Yeah, they are.
And
they're really iconic moments. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though I probably would always imagine in my non-visual brain, I would probably always imagine the Argonath just kind of coming down the river, kind of head on. But still, it's just such a majestic scene. I think you could just kind of lose yourself in. I could see the appeal of wanting to go back and revisit it and just kind of try different
angles and different styles of the statues and the carvings, like you said. Yeah.
There's always things that sort of add new interest and intrigue to the thing, and just think, maybe you'll,
what about this?
Go forward again and add this to it, just for your own interest, and it should be that way. You should be interested.
Yeah, it should be.
The scenes from the Shire, because of the beautiful sort of traditional English countryside ideas as well. That never gets tiring either.
No, I can imagine it wouldn't.
Scenes of forests as well, whether it's Mirkwood. Very, very happy with the version of Mirkwood I did. Fangorn Forest as well. Those 2, roots. Anything that involves them.
Is there a scene or a place in Middle-earth that you haven't done an illustration of yet that you'd like to?
There definitely are places I haven't been to, like Dunharrow. I guess that would be a good one. Yeah, I've never done a properly large, realistic, or kind of full-size. Iron Crown Enterprises had their card series, Middle-earth collectible card games, and I did a sort of small 6x9 inch painting of the Dunharrow for that, but really very limited. Shot down to an 1.5 inch size sort of thing. So that would be one of them. Of course, if we go to the Silmarillion, then I start thinking about all the other different kind of landscapes there. That would be there as well. So there's a few places I still prefer to go. Yeah.
You could just do like a travel gazette of Beleriand and its realms and just
You kind of
illustrate
could,
every place one by one.
Yeah, I know. But you remember Jeff Murray, the sort of painter who passed away tragically about 4 years ago. And he actually always tended to talk in terms of, I set up my canvas on such and such a hill and drew this on the morning of whatever in Middle Earth. So, I could see kind of doing a travelogue kind of idea or a series of pictures. But, with films and other kind of medium now, exploring almost in 3D, close enough to, it's getting to the point where still pictures are kind of a bit quaint. But that's what I want to do. That's all I really kind of to add to my own body of work. So whatever I leave behind, it'll be a fairly complete vision of one artist's inspiration. Good. I do think about things like series of pictures for like a Mordor series, say, where the whole of this Sam and Frodo and Gollum and their whole thing up to Mount Doom, a series of scenes. Like just earlier today, I was looking through a series of thumbnails for Fellowship and Two Towers, which I keep as kind of reference because that's kind of the master file, as it were. Mm-hmm. And I was going through and I thought, Window on the West. That's a nice little thumbnail, and maybe I should develop that a bit better. I did a version one time as a commission, but I've never been terribly happy with it. I thought, there's one that I think this angle is a better one, and I don't know why I didn't use that when I did do the thing. So it's like I see those things, and I did a good drawing there, and I should really reconsider doing it as a full size. So, and one of Treebeard yelling out his wrath at his dwelling at Welling Hall. I thought, that would really be a nice one to capture quite dynamically with the two hobbits there, and the kind of coloring that's described as kind of red,
we were just
yellow,
there
green.
recently.
We just read that on the show. It's such a powerful scene.
It really is a moment, isn't it?
Yep. There's so many little places that inform that story.
Yeah. That moment when he's standing under the mist or under the drips of the river above him, and he's backlit, and it talks about the stuff coming off him like little silver sparkles, and just such a beautiful moment. Oh.
Yeah, the descriptive language is incredible at times.
It really is.
And sometimes it's just shame to turn it into a picture because it's actually a bit more magical when it's indescribed like that.
That's a good point.
Wow, yeah.
I hadn't thought about that, especially coming from an artist. That seems
I have to admit that the language itself is almost too beautiful to try and kind of spoil it by being specific about it, because people do have different impressions sometimes.
That's a good point.
Those phrases and things, but hey, no one's really complained too loudly.
No, probably not. We've got an interesting question for you here. We recently made an appearance on another podcast where we were asked this question, and we thought this would be a good one to ask you. Imagine that the Bodleian Library suddenly finds a previously unknown box of unpublished manuscripts from Tolkien, fleshing out one of the unfinished stories from the Legendarium with completely new material that we haven't even seen or heard of before. What would you want it to be?
First thing that came to mind when I read that was Eldarion and Arendis. Even though I would love to, it would be a tough one because I'd love to have the full long version of Turin, of the Narn, and including Turin afterwards and his meeting with Morwen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then, or Tur and Gondolin and have the full story,
That's on my short list for sure.
Not just him arriving, but the rest of it as well.
Well, did you choose that answer because it's something you want to illustrate and, that you wish you just had more details from, or is it something that, you're a fan and you want to read that?
That's a good question. Both, actually.
That's fair.
Definitely to read it. Because as I was reading the book again, here's one of the things about me. I don't pick them up very, very often at all. And I hadn't read anything from Unfinished Tales until we were now looking at illustrating it. So I'm going back and I'm reading stuff and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's so lovely. I had forgotten how absolutely wonderfully descriptive and evocative. Yeah. The Seven Gates of Gondolin, I'm just marveling at that and thinking, of course, ideas immediately of drawings.
I was going to say, you could do a series of
there would be
on each of the gates, right?
There would be a nice series right there, and
that would be an amazing series, yeah.
And has been proposed at times before. But yeah, so.
Well, Sean, we now have a dream goal of one of us hits the lottery.
That's right.
Commission Ted to do a series on the gates of Gondolin.
A 7-gate of Gondolin series for Ted Nasmith.
Oh.
Yeah, it would be wonderful to have the two-word tale finished. Here's what I was going to say about Alex Lewis. He has actually taken up that challenge because a man who just Alex, my gosh, man of many talents. He and I have collaborated on music. He's a novelist. He hasn't had a lot of success in publishing anything, but then he's got, that's just up to him to sort of work that one out. But at the same time, he's written much fan fiction for Tolkien over the years, and one of the things he took on was, let's see if I can write in Tolkien style and finish the Gondolin tale. And he showed it to Priscilla Tolkien. She gave him her blessing for that. He's never had any problem with the estate or anything particularly, and he put it out as a special edition with illustrations by Ruth Lakin, his partner and now wife. Mm-hmm. It fetches quite respectable money on resales and auctions on eBay and places like that nowadays. I have my own copy of it, but believe me, he knows what he's doing. You cannot tell where Tolkien ends and begins.
Wow. That's high praise.
So it's just one of the things about Alex and Ruth that they're invaluable, and there's their book on Tolkien Switzerland. They wrote a book on Tolkien's potential as a spy, which caused no end of controversy, but the fact is they have a case. So they're my dear friends, and we hang out sometimes and just...
I think I remember seeing some of the controversy around that. I'd never read it myself, so I couldn't speak to the controversy, but I remember seeing some of the furor in social media, I believe.
Yeah. But the tempest in a teapot. The fact is, Tolkien, if you really look at it objectively, and there's nothing shameful about this, it's something to be proud of. But the fact is, people like him go to their grave and they can't say a word about it. Look what happened to Alan Turing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ted, we know you're not just a Tolkien artist, although, of course, that's our focus here on the Prancing Pony Podcast. Mm-hmm. You've done some work illustrating other fantasy books, too. I know I've seen some George R.R. Martin-inspired work on your website. You mentioned Guy Gavriel Kay's Fionavar books. What other fantasy stories or fantasy worlds have you worked in, either professionally or for commissions or just for yourself?
Not a lot. As a reader, I was drawn to Tolkien, and that's kind of the reason why I'm such a massive fan, just because I love the books. And I have done art for Mark Seabank, who is a lesser-known author of fantasy, but he's definitely old school. He styles himself like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the Inklings as an old Western man, and he's starting to promote that. He has written 2 volumes of a 3-volume series, trilogy, which is brilliant. It's excellent. I haven't illustrated it, but I've done the cover art for that a couple times now in 2 different editions of it. And he's also now working on, I think there's up to 12 volumes of this series, and it's a fantasy series by Anthony Swithin, who is a pseudonym for Bill Sargent, who was a geography professor in Saskatoon, I believe it is, before he passed away in the 90s. And he had written this wonderful series. The shorthand name for it is Rockall. And it's sort of an Atlantean fantasy. And so anyway, a full-on fantasy series based on a realm that exists in the real world, but is only accessible to those who know how to find it. And so Mark Seabank is currently rewriting the entire series so that it is more palatable to modern readers. Unfortunately, William Sargent tended to write in the style of Lord Dunsany, sort of 19th century fantasy author. And it's just too wordy, too kind of proper and stiff and so on. And so Mark has now, Golan's Publishing in England is putting out these books with Mark's rewrite on them. And I've done the cover art for those 2 first volumes that have come out so far. Princes of Sendastri and the Lords of the Stony Mountains. So that's one I've been reasonably involved in. I'll do all the cover art for it, I imagine, possibly some interior illustrations, but it's all kind of a big deal as far as the effort to bring these back out. And they're definitely, they had come out in the 90s from HarperCollins, the first 4 volumes, and didn't sell terribly well. And unfortunately, William Sargent resisted any editing, and sometimes it's really the best thing. You should allow that to happen, maybe. Yeah. But unfortunately, the books didn't do that well, and yet they are worthy of this sort of second go-round. And Mark is definitely the one for that, although he's a frustrated artist at times. It's hard to make it in fantasy and in publishing.
I imagine it's an incredibly impacted field. They've got to be
well, especially because we're in this sort of place between traditional publishing and online publishing. It's a very bizarre sort of interface, and what people want, what is
hard marketplace to navigate, I imagine.
Exactly. For all journalists and all.
Yeah. So pretty much all fantasy stuff that you tend to work in, isn't it? A lot of people, I mean, there's no reason that it has to be this way, but I know a lot of fantasy fans are also science fiction fans. A lot of fantasy artists also do science fiction work. You're pretty much just a fantasy guy, aren't you?
It does seem that way. I mean, and it's not that I don't want to do science fiction or some other kinds of genres, but one leads to another, and you have the reputation for that particular thing. And of course, anyone who checks my website would see, oh, look, architectural renderings, automotive art, oh, look, educational stuff, all sorts of odds and ends.
Right.
I'm not thinking, oh, I wish I had gotten into science fiction more than I did, but it's just bad. No, I could do movies, sort of, what do you call those, matte paintings?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That would have been a whole realm for me easily.
Right.
It just wasn't in the cards. I mean, I could have worked on the films, the Lord of the Rings films too, and just was circumstantially very awkward at that point in time, and I just decided to let go of it.
Wow. Yeah.
Which was fine. Yeah. So apparently new stuff. I just heard today that there's not just the Amazon, but some other Lord of the Rings being talked about. What's this now?
I read a rumor about something too, about another movie coming out.
Yeah, because someone was saying, they're going to deal with this Morgoth and develop his. And I thought, I put Morgoth or Sauron, and the guy says, well, they're already covering Sauron, and I said, what? So this isn't even to do with that. That's a series which has not even yet been filmed.
Right.
My goodness. Wow.
So we're all going to get more told. What about the Silmarillion?
So. Well, Sean, we may be around for a lot longer than I thought.
Yes. we may have a few recap podcasts in our future.
We very well might. Well, you mentioned just a minute ago, Ted, the fact that you've done some automotive work, and of course, our listeners know I'm a car guy. I'm a passionate car guy, and I want to hear a little bit more about the automotive artwork that you've done. On your website, you mentioned that you were inspired by the work of Art Fitzpatrick, who did advertising art and some automotive design from the 40s all the way up until he passed away in 2015. Yes. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into that, and do you still do automotive art? I still do automotive art.
Cool.
I have, one of the things about the COVID lockdowns is that if I have a chance to now, I can pull out some of the older stuff that I've done, and if I feel like working on it and just making some improvements, I will. And that's exactly what I was doing with just after the holidays with the 62 Pontiac Parisienne that I happened to do a painting of a few years ago, I guess, about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I've looked at it, it's been in a frame, and I thought, I kind of like to change that a bit, maybe tweak that a bit there. And that's me, but if I look at it, if it's sitting there and I'm looking at it, I want to fix it. So I have been, and I've had ideas for other ones. I've been going through some of the old files. I was doing that the other day. There's definitely other cars that I'm kind of keen to do. I plugged into a Facebook group that exhibits car paintings and automotive art every day, and there's a whole bunch of people doing that and from around the world. And one fellow from New Zealand, he blows me away. I think he's working in oils, but it's just extraordinary stuff. Really, really nice, very tasty. Backgrounds, everything. And a couple of other people who are ex-professionals who are exhibiting some of their personal stuff nowadays too. And again, it's just like nice, very tasty, all kinds of different styles and different sort of types of cars and vehicles and this sort of thing. So it's a big realm, and I'm glad to still kind of have a bit of a hand in. And I explained to people, okay, I was a bit of a fan of Art Fitzpatrick. Would see the ads in Life magazine or National Geographic or something, and always was inspired by that lovely realism there. And I soon found that I actually had a knack for this kind of thing too.
You sure do. I'm just
high school kind of.
I'm looking at the page right now, and I'm just stunned by a number of these. But yeah.
And so I was just thought, well, it would be fun if I got into that as a professional thing, and I started to aim for that very thing. Working in Detroit or New York or an advertising agency, Toronto's TDF Studios, used to do a lot of car illustration work there, and my illustration instructor in high school was saying, "You're going to work at TDF, definitely. You've got the goods for that if you want to do it."
Wow!
Actually, ended up turning them down for a job offer at one point, but it was. And I did get interviewed in the summer after I graduated, but they basically said, "You'll never last in layout and paste up and that sort of like junior stuff. You're just too good."
Right.
So I went off and left it at that point, and then soon after got into architectural rendering, and that became my work for the next number of years until I retired from that particular thing.
Goodness.
And the Tolkien was all kind of going on the side.
Yeah.
But the automotive, what ended up happening was that around 71, that was the last year they used Art Fitzpatrick and Van Kaufman, who did the backgrounds. And from then on, I thought, well, it would be really cool to do that kind of stuff and continue that tradition as I saw it. But I knew that I wasn't going to be working in that field by then, and I just thought, I can do it for myself anyway. I love the whole thing that much that I want to just do them for myself, just to see what if art had carried on, what would it look like?
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
So that's a few 70s Pontiacs, 73, 74, 75, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then looking back, I was always enamored of the 62 model for whatever reason. I can't explain it, but it was just one of the first ones I kind of had a thing for. So I keep going back to that particular year. And then recently did 63
The
Tempest. Yes, that one.
I grew up. My dad had a 63 and a half Tempest when I was.
Oh, wow.
And of course, it wasn't the convertible like the one on your website, but
right. Pretty cool.
It's a pretty car.
Yeah. And there's a thing for me of taking something that's kind of drab or not all that exciting looking and giving it the glam treatment.
Yeah.
And at one point, I also realized that glamour, which is, by the way, a Gaelic word that means enchantment.
Right.
Glamour is the common thread between Tolkien and the automotive stuff. They both involve magic.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, they do, don't they? You're right.
Yeah.
The car comes with the girl standing there, and she doesn't for some reason come with the car in the end, but she got you to buy it though. There's your glamour, and of course the beauty of the car itself, which is my thing. I love the idea of bringing off the finish, the color. I actually go to the authentic colors for those years when I do those cars too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm looking at a number of them, and I recognize those colors. I'm a Pontiac geek myself.
A good man.
If I could pick any classic car, it would probably be the 65 GTO 389 Tri-Power. There's only 800 of those, and they command a lot more money than I can afford. But I love those cars, and
I can dream.
Seeing some of them here is pretty breathtaking. The realism. I love that style, that Art Fitzpatrick style. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's something else. And I got to meet him, which was another thrill for me.
Wow.
Should have been nearly 20 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
He lived a good long life. He was into his 90s. But at that point, he was in his mid-80s, I guess, and I went to a place north of Detroit, Auburn Hills. They were having one of those big concours. Incredible number of classic cars, restored, beautiful, and there was an art component. And he was there in person showing his originals, so it was just like, I'm wide-eyed. And I got a photo taken with him, and I got the chance to talk to him. And then a few weeks before that, I had actually written to him through his website, which was another thing that was absolutely a thrill. When I first got on the internet and realized that I could sort of, surf around and check, what might be there. I thought, Art Fitzpatrick, I wonder. And there was a website, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and they're selling original prints and everything. This is great. One thing people don't know about him is that a lot of his original art was destroyed, in a flood in the advertising agency's basement. I guess it would have been New York. And it's just like, oh, wow. Like heartbreaking, absolutely.
That is heartbreaking. Such a gifted artist.
All right. Well, Ted, before we wrap up here, we do have to ask you about what are you working on now? What's coming out next for you? I know you hinted a little while ago about a 2022 calendar, and I know you told us there's a new edition of the Silmarillion coming out, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a new edition that will match the format of the new Unfinished Tales and I guess all the other books that have been reformatted in a particular size. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was wonderful news that came somewhat suddenly late in the summer this year. So I was able to get a new painting done for it, and fortunately I painted Luthien and in a way that probably wouldn't have been permitted if I tried to suggest it the last time for the 2004 edition, and this being at Christopher Tolkien in very particular, about depictions of her. But Chris didn't have a problem with the sketch that I suggested I was basing this on, and what I wanted to do was Luthien at Tol Galen, near the end of her life, or when she's, that sort of epilogue to the story.
Right.
She and Baron are there, and kind of the land of willows, the land where the dead walk, or whatever they used to call it anyway.
That little island.
And it was a sort of a strange episode in many ways, but the thing is, willows are apparently connected mythologically with death and other resonance as well. So you have her standing there under a willow tree, surrounded by other willows near a river, the river that's described. They're on an island and set apart, and she's wearing the Silmaril, and she's wearing the Naglamir.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and you see little streaks of gray in her hair, showing that she's now aging, that she's mortal.
Right.
And so I just tried to create an iconic picture of her that is recognizable. Now, I have an advanced copy, and the reproduction, and she's standing in the middle where there's a fair amount of space around her, so you don't really see a lot of the detail now because this is shot down to the scale of the book. But when it's published in the calendar, you'll see a little bit more clearly. But so that is one of the new ones. The piece that I did about 3 years ago called Turgon at Fingolfin's Cairn, which was a private commission, that will be included because it's part of the Silmarillion.
I think we saw that one in Birmingham, right?
Yes, I would have shown it as part of the slides in Birmingham. Yeah.
I remember that was really impacted by that one. That's going to be neat to see.
Definitely.
So that I think, is coming out in the book as well. I better check that again. And a couple of ones that were in a calendar that came out, I guess, in year 2000, because of the first Silmarillion illustrated edition in 1998. And that had illustrations that weren't in the book. So we've used two of those ones in this new edition, so that there are 4 new paintings from the 45 as well, so that I guess it comes up to 49 pictures, plus 5 little pencil vignettes, we call them, on the section pages, first age, second age, third age.
Right. Oh, that's going to be great.
That sounds great. I can't wait for that.
You don't have any advance notice of the publication date, do you? Or do we already have that information out?
I believe it's in March. I forget the exact date there.
Okay.
So I was surprised that physical books were actually being sent out to people like me. I've got the slipcase edition and the regular edition already. And they said they went into kind of fast tracking the whole thing. I forget the reason, but I guess the publication date is still in the spring. I thought I had more time.
Well, very soon after this releases,
right around the corner. Yeah.
Yep, it's coming out soon. And then, of course, there was a plan to do a different type of calendar for the 2022 year, but because of the Silmarillion, they're going to do that as a calendar, and that will include new stuff as well, more new stuff, including my painting of the Naglamir from a few years ago.
Wow.
Excellent.
So people can see the painting of Luthien as well as this kind of close-up of the thing. A fellow in England who was there in Birmingham at the arch display at the Medicine Bakery, he did a version of my Naglamir in physical reality, like he sculpted it.
Oh, wow.
And so that was there, and he and I have been writing letters since then. He's quite the artisan. He's created an arc in stone that glows of itself as well, and some other interesting things. But, cool guy.
Wow.
Yeah, just works at home, and just one of these unsung, rather wonderfully eccentric Englishmen who is more talented than they have any right to deserve, but and not a lot of recognition either. But he loves what he does.
Yeah, that's amazing. Does he have a website or sell any?
No, that's the thing. Not even that. Yeah, and his paintings are extraordinary. But so that's what I'm more or less doing now. The next project, strictly speaking, is the Moria Gate.
Ooh,
and that is just a small private commission for a fellow who actually comes from Kuwait, of all places.
Oh, wow.
He's been on my Facebook roster a number of years now. He's stepping up and wants to. He's bought a few prints here and there, but now he wants to go to an original.
Wow. That is great.
Very cool.
Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining us. We are so glad to have had you back on the show, and honestly, we're happy to have you back anytime.
Well, thank you. My pleasure, and you honor me. Thank you so much, guys.
Our pleasure, truly.
Ted, thank you so much. It's really an honor to talk to you, and it's been just such a great time. And listeners, I want to let you all know that you can find Ted and his artwork online at tednasmith.com, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes for this episode. Mm-hmm. You can also find him on Facebook at Ted Nasmith Art Shop, and you can even get his CD on Bandcamp. So check those out, please.
Please do. And we will, as Sean said, make sure to put all those links in our show notes on the website and in our online spaces as well.
Yep. So please watch for that. And folks, please join us again next time when we get back to the book with the first part of Book 3, Chapter 5, The White Rider.
We're going to be reunited, and it'll feel so good, with our old friends Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, whom we haven't seen for a while, and quite possibly even an older friend. And no, I don't mean me.
You're not quite as old as the guy I'm thinking
Thankfully,
of. No,
I don't think so.
You are not the offspring of the thought of Iluvatar.
No,
but
most
yes,
assuredly
indeed,
not.
The guy we're thinking of is a much older friend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, folks, we want to take a moment to thank some really important people. That's our patrons at the Kierdan's contributions here. They are DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, Ella in California, Joseph in Texas, Kathy from North Carolina, Lori from Washington, Josh in Oklahoma, Carlos in California, Brian from the UK, Cameron in Nevada, and Ned from Connecticut. Thank you all so much for your support.
Still amazes me, and we are so grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you. We also want to thank the team, of course, that helps make this show better. That includes our research assistants, along with our Barliman, Becca Davis, producer Jordan Rennells, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, and website guru Phil Dean.
This show truly would not be what it is without our supporters and our teammates, so thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Now, folks, be sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is.
Mm-hmm. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your Tolkien-inspired art to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barliman is a lot more reliable these days than he used to be, but we do still get a lot of mail.
We do.
We do promise we'll get to you as soon as we can, and your question or comment may be featured on a future episode.
Now, as always, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
farewell, friends.